Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are really getting into it. We're cracking the code on extreme success in the real estate world,
hmm
and we're not looking at averages here, not the middle ground. We're focused entirely on the top 1%.
Yeah, the heavy hitters.
Exactly. The nationally recognized high volume producers, the ones who consistently close massive deals year in, year out.
That's right. And our mission today, for you listening, is to really pull back the curtain. We're trying to reverse engineer their success formula.
Okay.
We've synthesized a pretty massive stack of sources for this one. We're looking at everything from, the mechanics of human behavior, persuasion tactics,
Psychology.
right, the psychology, but also the big picture stuff, massive scale business systems, specialized real estate finance strategies.
So we're moving beyond just the surface level tips, the kind of top 5 things lists.
Definitely. We want to deliver the deep operational and psychological blueprint, the stuff that actually allows these agents to generate millions in sales volume consistently.
And, the overwhelming takeaway, looking at all this material, it seems like the difference between just a good agent and a truly great one, it's rarely simple market knowledge alone.
No, it's much more than that.
It's this intricate, repeatable system. So we've broken that system down into 4 core components.
Makes sense.
And we're starting right now with the internal architecture, the mindset, the habits required. Because really, before you even look at the market, you have to look at what's going on, between the agent's ears.
That's absolutely the foundation. Section 1, the internal game. Mindset, habits, and vision. So like you said, the foundation of sustained high performance, it's internal programming. And the absolute core of that internal game is a deep, deep understanding of the compounding effect of habits.
Right.
This isn't just about, doing the right thing once in a while. It's about making those small, seemingly tiny decisions every single day, consistently.
Okay, let's unpack that idea of compounding a bit, because I think it's easy to just nod and say, yeah, compounding, but miss the real power. Why is the smallest decision the most crucial one?
Because it's the seed. It's the start of momentum. The source material really emphasizes this. All big things come from small beginnings. It sounds simple, but it's profound. If you improve by just 1% every day, mathematically, you end up like 37 times better over a year. But here's the catch.
Okay.
That growth, it's invisible for a long, long time. And that's the killer. That's where people fall off.
I think that's where the habit analogy you mentioned really hits home. Building a good habit. It's like tending a delicate flower, right? One careful day at a time needs constant nurturing.
Exactly.
Whereas breaking a bad habit, that's like trying to uproot a massive ancient oak tree inside you. It takes this huge immediate effort.
It really does. And the real crucible, the critical test for any aspiring top agent is surviving what one source calls the plateau of latent potential.
Okay, the plateau of latent potential. What is that exactly?
It's that unavoidable period. You are diligently putting in the work. You're making the calls, studying the market shifts, refining your scripts. But you are seeing absolutely zero, zip, nada in terms of breakthrough results.
Ah, the frustration gap. That space between all the effort you're putting in and the rewards you expect to see. That's got to be where most agents just give up.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
They mistake the lack of visible progress for a lack of actual progress. The system is working underground, so to speak, but the payoff hasn't surfaced yet.
Right. They're looking for a straight line up, but growth is almost never linear, is it?
Precisely. It's exponential, but the early part of that curve feels flat. The top agents, they know this. They know that consistency, even when morale is scraping bottom, is the only way to break through that plateau.
Okay, but here's the deeper question then. What stops an otherwise motivated, smart agent from adopting these obviously high-leverage habits in the first place, even if they intellectually know they work?
You'd think it's just laziness, right? Or maybe lack of discipline.
Yeah, that's the common assumption.
But the source material points to something far more fundamental and, frankly, more difficult to tackle.
It is.
Identity conflict. This is the biggest barrier, full stop.
Identity conflict. How so?
Okay, so you could rationally know, let's say, that calling 50 prospects a day is essential for hitting your numbers. Makes logical sense.
Right.
But that habit will fail, guaranteed, if it conflicts with your core established identity. If your deep inner voice, the story you tell yourself, is saying, I'm an artist, not a pushy salesperson. Or maybe, I'm a relaxed, creative entrepreneur, not some hyper-systematic CEO type.
Yeah, okay.
Then you create this immense internal pressure against the habit. because you're trying to maintain that existing self-image.
Yeah.
It feels wrong, fake even.
So your own mind and body actively resist the new behavior because it contradicts who you fundamentally believe you are. It's like cognitive dissonance trying to resolve itself.
Correct. The sources really stress this. Behavior change isn't sticky, it's not effective, until it's preceded by an identity change.
So you don't just try to make calls to get listings.
No. You shift your identity first. You decide to be the kind of person who aggressively generates market share, who sees prospecting as a core function, not a chore.
Okay.
The more deeply an action is tied to that new identity, the easier it becomes to maintain the habit. Because now, not doing it creates the conflict. You find ways to avoid contradicting your new successful self.
That's a powerful reframe. So, okay, once that internal identity shift starts to happen, the agent needs something to aim for, right? A clear, powerful, and crucially measurable vision to guide all this new behavior. What's the blueprint for a truly productive vision, especially when you're aiming for high performance?
Well, the best visions, the ones with real sticking power, they have to balance both the personal and the professional lives. You can't just have business goals.
Why is the personal side so critical?
Your personal vision, the why behind it all, that's the critical element. This absolutely must provide the passion, the raw emotional energy required to push through the really tough moments. What one source calls the valley of despair.
The Valley of Despair sounds grim.
It's that inevitable phase filled with fear, uncertainty, discomfort. All the stuff that makes you want to quit when you're stuck on that plateau we talked about.
So that personal motivation, maybe it's financial freedom for your family, building a legacy, or just wanting more control over your lifestyle.
Right.
That's the actual fuel for the massive engine required for high volume.
Absolutely. It's the heart of it. And when it comes to actually articulating the goals that build towards that vision, clarity is completely non-negotiable. Meaning we cannot just aim for vague concepts like success or being happy. That doesn't work. We also have to use positive framing.
Positive framing.
As opposed to
focusing on what you don't want. If you tell yourself, I really want to get out of debt, guess what your non-conscious mind locks onto?
Yeah.
Exactly. The concrete image of debt. And the source material strongly suggests that what you focus on tends to expand in your reality. You're programming yourself to think about the problem, not the solution. Wow, okay. That's a fascinating sort of mechanical detail of the mind. How should you rephrase that then to target the outcome effectively?
Instead of focusing on the obstacle, the debt, you focus on the desired end state. Something like, I enjoy being financially free and clear with X dollars securely in my bank account. See the difference?
Yeah, it's focused on the positive state, the goal achieved. And you mentioned measurable.
Crucially, the goal must be measurable. If a goal is vague, your non-conscious mind just can't lock onto it for direction. It doesn't know what to aim for. You have to be able to answer very precisely. How will I know specifically when I've succeeded? Otherwise, your internal guidance system just spins its wheels. No target.
That measurable approach, that clarity, it leads directly into the system of accountability that these top teams use, right? But for a high-achieving CEO-level agent, isn't accountability just about hitting the numbers, checking the boxes? Why do the sources insist on these, deeper, reflective questions?
Because true accountability, the kind that drives real growth, isn't passive. It's not your boss checking your homework assignment.
Okay.
It is actively, honestly confronting the truth of your situation, your actions, your results every single week. It focuses relentlessly on your freedom of choice and the direct consequences of those choices.
So it's empowering, not punitive.
Hugely empowering.
Yeah.
Because it shifts the individual away from dwelling on resistance, excuses, external factors, and towards exploring possibilities, ownership, and what they can control.
How do top agents actually apply this kind of daily or weekly introspection within a team structure? Is it just journaling?
It's often more structured. They utilize key, open-ended, and reflective accountability questions, frequently during morning huddles or weekly team growth meetings.
And these aren't just, did you hit your call target?
No, not at all. They're questions like, what did I commit to doing last week that I didn't actually complete, and what choice did I make instead? Or what's the one fear I need to consciously address this week to move my biggest goal forward?
Wow, those are confronting.
They are. But this structure allows the agent to essentially self-coach. It helps them guide their working week with deep honesty and introspection. And that creates the necessary internal pressure to maintain alignment with that new high-performance identity we talked about. It closes the loop.
Okay, so once that internal game is calibrated, The mindset is right, the identity is aligned with high performance, we move to the external engine. How do these top agents actually structure their business acquisition pipeline?
Right.
And the biggest takeaway here, I mean, this seems almost non-negotiable across all the high-volume blueprints we looked at, is the strategic, almost obsessive preference for seller listings.
This is absolutely fundamental, especially if you want to scale a profitable business, not just be a busy agent. Listings maximize your per-hour compensation. Full
Right.
stop.
Way is that? Just break it down simply.
Because the workload involved is significantly lighter, hour for hour. It takes far, far less time to obtain a listing, market it effectively, and manage the transaction than it does to continuously show properties, write endless offers, and negotiate back and forth for a single buyer client.
Can you give us sort of a numerical feel for that efficiency difference, like hours versus hours?
Sure. Think about the time commitment. A buyer, from the very first contact through the search process, offers, inspection, closing. They can easily consume 60, 70, even 80 hours of an agent's dedicated time, often spread out over weeks or months.
Okay, yeah, that sounds familiar.
Now, compare that to a listing. Once you secure the listing appointment and get the agreement signed, the agent typically needs maybe 15 to 25 hours total to get it market ready, coordinate showings, handle negotiations, and manage the contract through closing.
Wow, that's like a 3x or 4x leverage difference in time.
Exactly. That leverage is precisely why listings are so strategic for scaling. It frees up your most valuable asset, your time.
And that time leverage makes the potential volume just staggering.
It really does. The numbers bear it out. A highly focused agent, one who's effectively leveraging systems and maybe some support staff, can realistically handle 15, maybe 20, even 25 seller listings per month.
Okay.
Now, that same agent, even with leverage, would be incredibly hard-pressed to continuously manage, say, 7 or 8 active buyer clients effectively over the long haul. Just a different intensity. Listings fundamentally enable higher transaction volume with less burnout.
And the listings themselves aren't just individual transactions, right? They act like magnets for new business, and they give the agent a crucial edge in market knowledge.
Absolutely. 2 huge benefits there. First, listings put the agent squarely on the front end of pricing,
Front end of pricing.
meaning they see immediately how the market is reacting to new inventory, to specific price points, to different marketing strategies. They get real-time feedback. This gives them an intimate, up-to-the-minute market knowledge that agents focused only on the buyer side simply can't replicate. They're always reacting, not predicting.
Okay. And the second benefit, the lead generation.
Yes, and this is a key systemic advantage, often highlighted in models like the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, the MREA book. A huge chunk, potentially half of a top agent's new buyer leads, can be captured systematically and consistently directly from their existing seller listing program.
So the MREA model basically preaches that listings are, in themselves, the most powerful form of lead generation. Your sign is in the yard, your marketing materials are out there.
Exactly. The listing puts the agent's name and face on the highest visibility opportunities in town, the for sale signs. That listing generates calls, website visits, open house traffic. Essentially, it generates buyer leads. And then those buyers, down the line, often become future sellers, creating more listings. It's a perpetual engine if you run it right.
It is. But that kind of volume, generating all those leads from listings and other sources, it requires a really robust system to manage it all, doesn't it? You can't just use sticky notes.
Absolutely not. The source material introduced a useful framework for pipeline management called LAPS.
LAPS. Okay, what does that stand for?
It stands for Leads, Analysis, Pursue, and Success. It's basically the sequential funnel that helps keep the whole process organized and ensures nothing falls through the cracks.
Leads, analysis, pursue, success. Okay. But what happens in that analysis phase? That seems like a critical filter. What separates the top 1% in how they analyze leads?
The analysis phase is all about rigorous vetting. See, leads are just options, right? Potential deals.
Yeah.
But top agents don't chase every single shiny object that comes across their desk.
Waste too much time.
Exactly. Analysis involves running the numbers, of course, is the deal viable, but maybe more importantly, it's about vetting the lead for motivation, timing, and capacity. Are they really going to transact? They're often looking for what some call FUD.
FUD.
Fear, uncertainty, or desire. Is there a compelling reason, fear of foreclosure, uncertainty about a job transfer, a strong desire for a bigger home that's powerful enough to compel this person to actually take action? This is where they decide if a lead is worth actively pursuing.
That makes sense. Filtering for real motivation. Now, where do these leads actually originate for the top 1%? It's got to be more than just waiting for the phone to ring or checking the MLS, right?
Oh, definitely. They certainly utilize traditional sources like the MLS, referrals, their sphere of influence. But the truly top agents also leverage proprietary, often proactive tactics to essentially create inventory where other agents might not see any opportunity.
Like what? Give us some examples.
This could include buying highly targeted direct mail lists,
Hmm.
maybe focusing on homeowners with specific equity levels or absentee owners or properties owned for a certain number of years. Or it could be more old school, like physically engaging in what's called driving for dollars.
Driving for dollars.
Yeah, literally driving specific neighborhoods, looking for properties that appear distressed, vacant, or maybe just neglected potential deals that aren't publicly listed anywhere yet. It's a quantity-first approach at the top of the funnel. They know the quality of their eventual closings is directly proportional to the sheer quantity of opportunities they generate initially.
That volume approach, generating leads from listings, direct mail, driving around, it demands a massive focus on clear, simple, effective marketing, doesn't it? You need a message that cuts through the noise.
Absolutely. And we've seen that top agents often structure their messaging using principles rooted in clarity, sometimes referred to as the story brand approach. We should probably pause and explain what that model actually is because it's quite different from typical real estate marketing.
Okay, yeah. Story brand. What's the core idea?
The core premise is almost revolutionary, especially for agents who often, understandably, want to make themselves the hero of the story. StoryBrand flips that. It says, simplicity wins. And critically, the client is the hero of their own story. The agent is merely the expert guide.
The guide, not the hero.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Simple, clear messages that are immediately relevant to the client's problem are what result in sales. If your marketing message is confusing or focused on yourself, you lose immediately.
So the message needs to resonate with the client's deeper internal motivation, not just the obvious external problem. Like the external problem is, I need to sell my house.
Right.
But the internal problem might be, I need to avoid the stress and public scrutiny of selling, or I need to provide financial security for my kid's future.
Exactly right. The marketing has to speak to that underlying why. Therefore, the strategy demands that every marketing effort, every touch point, needs a clear, repeatable one-liner.
A one-liner, like a tagline.
Sort of, but more specific. This one-liner must immediately position the customer as the hero facing a challenge, and the agent as the guide who can help them overcome it. For example, instead of a generic agent-centric line like, we are the #1 top producing agent in the city.
Right, which is all about the agent.
A good story brand style one-liner might be something like, we help busy executives sell their luxury homes quickly and discreetly for top dollar so they can focus entirely on their demanding careers.
Ah, I see. The potential customer immediately sees themselves in that story. That's me. They understand my problem.
Precisely. It connects instantly. Finally, in this section on systems, let's talk about how technology, specifically PropTech, is helping to systemize client acquisition and valuation, really enabling this kind of massive scale we're discussing.
Yeah, tech's got to be a huge piece now.
It's been a total game changer, primarily because it enables two things essential for high-volume business: speed and transparency.
Okay.
Think about it. The sheer availability of data and online tools has drastically improved property search, comparison, selection, everything. For sophisticated clients, especially investors who rely heavily on multi-source data for their decisions, PropTech improves market transparency almost instantly. They can access more info faster.
And the speed evaluation itself seems like it's fundamentally changed the game, particularly for finance.
Hugely. Automated valuation models, or AVMs, they make getting a preliminary valuation much, much easier and faster. This significantly reduces the time required for mortgage pre-approvals, underwriting decisions, even insurance quotes. In a fast-moving market, that speed is a massive competitive advantage.
Right. And to manage that huge volume of leads, we talked about the L in LAPS, you need tech for that too, right?
Oh, absolutely essential. Digital CRM systems, customer relationship management tools are the backbone. You need them for segmenting leads, setting up automated follow-up sequences, building detailed customer profiles, tracking every step of the transaction. Without systematized technology handling the admin and the follow-up, trying to scale to the top 1% level, it's simply impossible. The agent would drown in paperwork and missed opportunities.
Okay, so we've established the internal mindset game and the external systems for generating that high volume of business. Now we need to move into the softer skills, maybe, the subtle influence tactics that top agents use once they're actually face-to-face with a client or across the table from a counterparty.
Yeah, this is about mastering the transaction itself, the human element.
Right. And the first principle here, which seems often rooted in philosophies like ninja selling, is about prioritizing the person over the actual property.
This is such a critical philosophical shift, and it's counterintuitive for many agents. Most agents, when they meet a potential client, they immediately start talking about the bricks and sticks, right?
Yeah, the floor plan, the price, the condition, the features.
Exactly. Top agents consciously reject that approach, at least initially. They focus first on understanding the client's four core values, what truly matters to them. They listen intently, actively, for language that indicates a need for their service. And that need is almost always driven by some kind of change, pain, or pleasure.
So they're diagnosing the human motivation before they even start talking about the asset itself.
Precisely. Get the why before the what.
That sounds like it requires some pretty rapid rapport building and maybe even a bit of psychological profiling. How do they achieve that kind of instant connection and uncover those deep motivations quickly without coming across as, intrusive or nosy?
It's about using intentional but very low stakes, open-ended questions, often categorized under the handy F-or-D acronym.
F or D. Okay, what's that?
Family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. Asking genuine questions about a client's family, what they do for a living, what they enjoy doing for fun, or maybe what they dream about achieving with this next move.
Ah, okay.
It's a highly effective, very organic way to build an instant connection. It uncovers the client's deep, often non-obvious motivations and needs. It's so much more powerful than just leading with, "So how much money do you want for your house?"
Yeah, it builds trust first. That focus on the human side, on rapport and trust, it must translate directly into how they approach negotiation too. Especially some of the tactics mentioned, like leveraging psychological safety, but actually starting with no. That sounds completely backward. Isn't the goal always to get the client to say yes?
In everyday conversation, maybe.
Yeah.
But in high-stakes negotiation, forcing a yes too quickly, too aggressively, it instantly put the client's guard up.
Right. They feel like they're being sold to, pushed.
Exactly. They feel pressured, and the agent immediately gets categorized as just another untrustworthy salesperson trying to get something from them. Instead, triggering a no response early on actually makes the speaker, the client, the counterparty, feel safe, secure, and crucially, in control.
How does no make them feel in control?
Because no is fundamentally a tool of protection, of defense. Once someone has successfully deployed their no, their guard comes down. They've asserted their autonomy. Now they feel confident enough to actually listen to what you have to say because they know they can say no, again, if needed.
Okay, I think I get the theory. Can you give us a concrete example of how an agent might use this start with no technique in a real conversation?
Sure. Instead of making an assumptive, high-pressure ask like, "Hey, do you have a few minutes right now to talk about listing your property?" which pressures them towards a potentially defensive or reluctant yes. A top negotiator might ask something like, "Is now a bad time to talk?"
Is now a bad time?
Right. When the person inevitably says, no, now is fine, what have they just done?
They've said no to the negative and implicitly agreed to talk.
And more importantly, they have exercised control over the situation from the outset. They feel more confident, more secure, and therefore much more receptive to whatever follows. It's subtle, but it completely changes the dynamic of the opening exchange.
That's really interesting. Okay, so they've opened the conversation, the client is listening, feeling safe. How does the agent then confirm that they've actually achieved a true breakthrough, that the other party genuinely trusts them and feels understood, not just heard?
They aim for what some negotiation experts call the two most powerful words you can hear from your counterpart.
Which are?
That's right.
That's right. Not yes.
Not yes.
Yeah.
Yes can be counterfeit, just a way to move you along. But when your counterpart says, "That's right," usually after you've summarized their position or articulated their feelings accurately, it signifies something deeper. It means they feel truly fundamentally understood, not just heard, but understood. That feeling of validation, of being gotten, is where trust skyrockets. It's the essential precursor to real agreement and compromise later on. Getting to "that's right" is a major milestone in the negotiation.
And what happens when the agent needs to push back? When they need to subtly reject a request or a demand from the other side, but without being confrontational or damaging that rapport they've built, how do they say no, gently?
They often employ what are called calibrated how questions. These are brilliant, actually. They function as a gentle, non-confrontational form of no.
Calibrated how questions.
Questions like, how am I supposed to accept that offer when the comparable sales don't support it? Or maybe, how can we possibly deliver on that closing timeline given the lender's current processing times? Or even, how can I do that? Delivered with genuine curiosity.
Okay, I see. They're not saying, no, I won't. They're asking how.
Exactly. And these questions serve a very specific functional purpose. They subtly push the counterpart to think about the agent's constraints and to start searching for other solutions. Solutions which, quite often, align perfectly with the agent's own desired outcome. The beauty is, the other party ends up solving the agent's problem for them without the agent having to deliver a blunt, potentially value-destroying refusal.
That's clever. Okay, moving beyond these single interaction tactics, top agents also seem to leverage a classic persuasion strategy, the foot in the door technique. This is about commitment and consistency, right? Influencing the client's long-term self-image.
It is. It's straight out of classic compliance psychology research, like Cialdini's work. The idea is that getting someone to agree to a small initial commitment can be used to subtly manipulate their self-image.
How does that work in a real estate context?
If you can get a prospect to commit to a minor early action, something easy, low friction, say, maybe preparing a brief written list of their must-haves in a new home, or signing a simple agency disclosure form early on, it starts to transform them in their own mind from just a prospect into a client or even an advocate for your process.
Okay.
Once that new, slightly more committed self-image starts to take hold, that person will then feel an internal pressure to act consistently with it. They'll naturally and more easily comply with a whole range of future requests, even larger ones, that align with that initial commitment and their evolving identity as your client.
So if a seller commits early to, say, preparing a list of recent home improvements or signing off on a preliminary disclosure, they're now psychologically invested. It makes future bigger asks like agreeing to a price reduction or investing in staging much easier for them to accept.
Precisely. They're now committed to the process, not just evaluating the outcome. It builds momentum. Finally, when it comes to the pointy end structuring the actual deal, top agents seem to have a hard and fast rule about negotiation timing with sellers.
Okay, what's the rule?
The rule is simple, but apparently critical. Always, always try to get the sellers to accept your offer, or at the very least make a concrete counteroffer, while you are still sitting there with them, face to face, or at least on the same call.
Don't let them sleep on it.
Exactly. If they say they can't accept the current offer, the immediate follow-up question should be, okay, I understand. What price and terms will you accept?
Yeah.
And then, crucially, the agent needs to be quiet. Just shut up.
Let the silence do the work.
Let the silence do the work. It forces them to confront their own bottom line, to name their number, without any external distraction or influence.
What's the big danger of letting them walk away without a decision or a counter?
The risk, according to the experienced agents in our sources, is enormous. If a seller leaves that meeting or call without accepting or countering, the chances of them calling back favorably are described as slim to none.
Why so low?
Because the common anecdotal scenario is this. They immediately go tell someone else about the offer, a friend, a family member, maybe even another agent they know. And that person, often trying to be helpful or maybe having their own agenda, inevitably says something like, oh, you can get more than that. I'll offer you just a little bit more. And boom, the first agent loses control, loses momentum, and often loses the deal entirely. Speed and decisiveness are key.
Wow. We also saw some really creative methods mentioned for bridging cash gaps in deals, especially situations where maybe the seller's low on cash and the commission itself becomes a sticking point. This is where some financial engineering comes in.
Yes. Successful agents understand that getting the deal closed is paramount. Sometimes that requires thinking outside the standard commission box.
For example.
They might strategically use commission splits, meaning the agent voluntarily contributes a portion of their own commission to help bridge a small cash gap for the buyer or seller, just to make the numbers work and get it done.
So they take a small hit now for the bigger win later.
Exactly. Or in situations where there's genuinely no cash for a commission right at closing, they might get creative with things like promissory notes secured by the property itself, essentially deferring part of their payment. They're willing to temporarily adjust their immediate take to ensure the long-term benefit of the closed transaction, the satisfied clients, and the enhanced reputation. It's about playing the long game.
All right, we've covered the internal game, the mindset, the habits. We've covered the external systems for generating massive business volume. We've covered mastering the actual transaction, the negotiation, and client service. The final stage, the peak of the mountain, really is scaling up, moving beyond just being a high-producing individual agent to building a true, sustainable business that secures long-term financial destiny.
Exactly. And this brings us squarely to the 3 L's of scale, which are foundational in models like MREA.
Leads, listings, and
Leverage. Leads, listings, and leverage. The first 2 L's, leads and listings, are so incredibly effective that if an agent truly focuses on maximizing them, they will inevitably, mathematically reach a ceiling.
a ceiling.
A point where they literally have more business, more opportunities than they can possibly handle alone, no matter how efficient they are. At that precise moment, they face a stark choice. Either start using leverage systematically or consciously decide to make less money and turn business away.
So leverage isn't just a nice to have for growth, it becomes an absolute necessity to break through that ceiling.
It's a requirement, not a luxury.
What does embracing that necessity mean for the role of the agent, the one who's now transitioning from top producer to essentially team leader or CEO?
It requires another massive psychological shift, similar to the identity work we talked about earlier. The team leader must become comfortable, even confident, in letting go of the majority, if not eventually all, of their direct buyer-side business.
Really? Let go of buyers completely.
For the leader, yes, often. Their primary focus needs to shift almost entirely to generating high-level listings, the highest leverage activity, building and refining the team's systems, and leading and managing the team structure itself. They move from being the star player to being the coach and general manager of a structured enterprise.
That's a big leap. And what's the advantage for the agents who join one of these successful, well-structured teams? Why not just stay solo?
They benefit enormously from an immediate mind share of success. It's like drafting behind a lead cyclist. Even brand new agents joining an established, high-performing team enjoy instant credibility and a certain level of respect in the market, simply because they are associated with that team's proven track record, their established branding, and their dialed-in systems.
So the team brand elevates everyone associated with it.
Absolutely. The team acts like a cohesive, amplified brand across countless client contacts, marketing channels, community events, something an individual agent working alone could never replicate at the same scale.
Now, scaling up, especially when it involves investing in properties yourself or expanding the business significantly, often requires leveraging capital that might be outside the agent's own immediate bank account. This brings us to an interesting concept mentioned, the deal delta. What's that?
The deal delta. The idea is that every successful real estate deal, particularly investment deals, requires 3 distinct essential elements: knowledge, your market expertise, deal analysis skills; hustle, the time, effort, and labor involved in finding and executing the deal; and money, the actual capital needed.
Knowledge, hustle, money.
Okay. Now, if you, as the agent or investor, bring immense hustle and deep market knowledge to the table, but you lack sufficient capital for a particular deal size, you've identified a deal delta. Your role then becomes finding a good partner, maybe a passive investor, maybe another professional who can provide the money to fill that delta. Partnership becomes essential for significant growth beyond your personal financial capacity.
That connects directly to the idea of creative finance, using OPM, other people's money, to acquire assets and grow your portfolio without having to liquidate all your own savings for every single deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Real estate is almost uniquely positioned in the investment world to allow savvy individuals to leverage their knowledge, their time, their creativity, their hustle to effectively replace the need for large amounts of their own cash.
Wow.
This is the heart of creative finance. It could involve finding private lenders who trust your expertise, negotiating seller financing where the owner carries back a note, using lease options, subject to deals, all sorts of techniques. However, and this is a crucial anchor point, we have to constantly remember a fundamental law of finance, one supported by centuries of historical data.
Which is?
Investment rewards can only be increased by the necessary assumption of greater risk. There's no free lunch. Top agents and investors, they understand this relationship intimately. They aren't afraid of risk, but they're very calculated risk takers. They know how to mitigate it, but they accept it as part of the path to higher returns.
Okay, so the goal for a top agent isn't just hitting a high commission number this year. It's about building sustainable, long-term, maybe even multi-generational wealth. What are the key strategies they use to maximize wealth beyond the immediate commission check?
The primary strategy revolves almost entirely around leveraging the unique benefits of real estate ownership, particularly the tax advantages.
Taxes. Always important. What's the first big one?
The first and arguably most powerful for cash flow is depreciation. This is a concept that many people misunderstand. Depreciation is essentially a paper loss that the tax code allows you to claim based on the assumed structural deterioration of a building over time, even if the property is actually appreciating in market value.
So it's a non-cash expense. It doesn't actually come out of your bank account. It just exists on the tax return.
Exactly, and that's why it's so powerful. It directly shields your actual real cash flow from income taxes.
How does that work? Give me an example.
Okay, let's say your rental property generates $10,000 in positive cash flow for the year after all operating expenses and mortgage payments. But, based on the IRS schedules, you can claim $8,000 in depreciation expense for that same property. Your taxable income from that property is only $2,000, $10K cash flow minus $8K depreciation. You pocketed $10, but only pay tax on $2.
Wow. Okay. That's significant.
It is. And furthermore, under certain conditions, you can sometimes utilize these passive losses generated by depreciation as income accelerators to offset income from other sources, effectively lowering the agent's overall tax burden across their entire financial picture.
That's huge. Now, what happens eventually when they decide to sell one of these investment properties? How do they handle the capital gains tax, which could be substantial?
Well, there are two scenarios. If for some reason they sell a property for a loss, that loss can actually be beneficial from a tax perspective. It can typically be fully deducted on their tax return, helping to lessen the financial sting of the loss by offsetting other gains or income.
All right, turning a negative into a slight positive tax-wise.
Right. But more importantly, and more commonly for successful investors, if they sell for a gain, which is the goal they strategically utilize, the Section 1031 tax-deferred exchange. This is often called the like-kind exchange. The 1031 exchange. Heard of it, but how does it work? In simple terms, it allows an investor to defer paying capital gains tax on the sale of an investment property, potentially indefinitely, provided they reinvest all of the proceeds from the sale into a like-kind replacement investment property or properties of equal or greater value, all within a very specific, strict timeline mandated by the IRS.
So you can basically roll your profits from one property into the next, tax-free.
Tax deferred. That's the key distinction. You still owe the tax eventually, but you can keep deferring it, allowing your entire pre-tax capital gain to continue compounding and working for you over potential decades, even across multiple generations if structured correctly through estate planning. It's an incredibly powerful wealth-building tool.
That compounding effect over long periods, sheltered from taxes, that really feels like the true engine of serious real estate wealth. We saw a really compelling example in the sources about a specific retirement strategy using rental properties. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it's a very deliberate, self-reliant strategy for creating retirement income. The example often involves acquiring multi-unit rental portfolios, let's say, for simplicity, a 40-unit apartment building, and financing it strategically, maybe with a 15-year mortgage note instead of a 30-year.
Okay, a shorter payoff period.
Right. The goal is to have the mortgage completely paid off around the time you plan to retire. Once that debt is gone, the substantial monthly rental income, which from a 40-unit building could easily be $12,000, $15,000 a month, or even significantly more depending on the market.
Yeah, that's serious income.
That income will then be largely, if not entirely, tax-free for many years into retirement. Why? Because the non-cash expense of depreciation continues even after the mortgage is paid off. It keeps shielding that robust cash flow from taxes, providing a substantial, reliable, inflation-hedged, and highly tax-advantaged retirement income stream. It's a mechanism for creating a secure, self-funded retirement.
That's incredibly powerful. Okay, finally, let's bring this all back to operations. To successfully scale and manage all of this, the team, the listings, the investments, the finances, the top agent needs rock-solid operational systems, right? They can't just wing it. They need to operate more like a franchise than a solo shop.
Precisely. The sources emphasize that for a top agent's business to grow sustainably, especially beyond the founder's constant daily involvement, they absolutely must create what's called a franchise prototype.
Franchise prototype.
It means building documented, repeatable systems and processes for everything. A system that produces consistent, predictable results, regardless of who is executing the task. The goal is to eliminate the need for constant management decisions and interventions wherever possible. The system should handle 90% of the predictable scenarios smoothly, freeing up the leader's time and energy to focus only on the exceptions, the strategy, and future growth.
And a huge part of that system has to be controlling costs, right?
Yeah.
High sales volume is great, but it doesn't mean much if expenses eat up all the profit.
Absolutely critical. Meticulous budgeting and rigorous expense control are hallmarks of top performers.
Mhm.
We saw one example where a millionaire agent reported taking an astonishing 75% of their gross commission income straight to the bottom line as profit,
75%. How?
simply by rigorously, almost ruthlessly, controlling every single expense. They treat every dollar spent not as an expense, but as an investment that must provide a measurable return on investment. No fluff, no waste.
That level of control must extend to every operational facet, including things like managing properties, dealing with contractors, handling tenants, especially if you own that 40-unit building we talked about.
Oh, absolutely. They implement strict, documented systems for managing external vendors like contractors. For instance, using clearly spelled out bonus and penalty structures in their contracts. One tactic mentioned was allowing the contractor to set their own completion timeline,
Okay.
but then building in immediate significant financial penalties for missing that self-imposed deadline. This effectively transfers the incentive and the pressure to stay on track directly onto the contractor.
Clever. And for tenants.
Similar systematic approach. Training tenants from day one, during the lease signing and move-in process, on the correct procedures for paying rent, submitting maintenance requests, respecting office hours, etc. Setting clear expectations up front drastically reduces future management headaches, expenses, and risks over the long term. Everything possible is standardized to reduce chaos, minimize friction, and maximize profit margin. Hashtag tag outro.
So when we put it all together, what we've really reverse engineered here is this composite blueprint of the top 1% agent. They're not just salespeople. They have to be part behavioral scientist, mastering their own identity and habits, part systematic marketer, strategically leveraging listings for exponential lead generation,
Right.
part master negotiator, using subtle psychology and focusing on human connection,
Yeah, the soft skills are key.
and part sophisticated financial engineer, building long-term wealth through smart asset acquisition and meticulous operational management. It's the whole package.
That's the full system. And the key takeaway, again, is that success at this level rarely comes from one big break or some secret trick. It comes from the relentless compounding of small, consistent, identity-based decisions day after day, and the disciplined, relentless systematization of every single component of the business, from how they answer the phone to their long-term tax strategy.
Which brings us perfectly to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over this week. We established early on that perhaps the single greatest barrier to adopting positive, high-performing habits is that internal identity conflict, that little voice that says, yeah, but that's just not who I am.
Right, that internal resistance.
So here's the question for you. If you were to fully adopt the identity of a top 1% agent today, right now, what deeply held belief about yourself or about your current capabilities? Maybe it's a belief that you're simply too busy or not a natural salesperson or not good with systems. What belief would you have to shed immediately to fully align your daily thoughts and behaviors with that new, powerful self-image?
That's a confronting question, because it forces you to identify the specific gap between your current aspiration, maybe wanting to be a top performer, and your current conviction about who you are and what you're capable of. If you can clearly define that old belief that needs to be shed, you've honestly already completed the hardest part of the transition. You've identified the lock you need to pick.
Something for you to definitely consider this week as you approach your own business and your own goals. Thank you for joining us for this dip dive.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.